Priya Chetty and Kosi had exactly 4 minutes to make it to her blind date, a broken phone charger, 11% battery, and the kind of desperate energy that made a woman ignore every single piece of advice her mother had ever given her about getting into unmarked cars. "Okay," she muttered, standing on the curb outside her apartment building, squinting at her phone screen like it might somehow generate more battery through sheer force of will. The app said black sedan, license plate ending in 4471. There's a black sedan. This is fine. This is normal. This is not suspicious at all. The black sedan in question was, in fact, one of 3 identical black sedans currently idling outside her building, because approximately 6 minutes earlier, an entirely different woman had climbed out of a cab down the street. And Kwon Min-jae's security team, tasked with the deeply unglamorous job of escorting their boss to a blind date he'd been guilted into by his mother, had begun quietly, professionally panicking. "Is that her?" Deok-gu asked, squinting through the tinted window at Priya, who was currently power walking toward their car with the single-minded focus of a woman running dangerously late. "The photo his mother sent was blurry," Min-jun said, pulling up said photo, which showed a woman standing at enough of a distance and bad enough lighting that she could have plausibly been anyone between the ages of 25 and 45. "Black woman, professional attire, said she'd be arriving around this time near this address." That's basically her. That is not a lot to go on. It's what we have. Priya reached the car, yanked open the back door with the confidence of someone who had, in fact, ordered this exact car through an app 4 minutes ago and had absolutely no reason to suspect otherwise, and climbed in. "Oh, thank God," she said, buckling her seatbelt in one fluid motion. "I am so sorry. I know I'm probably making you wait. My phone's basically dead. I had the world's most chaotic day. Please just get me to Cheongdam as fast as legally possible." Deok-gu and Min-jun exchanged a look in the rearview mirror, the particular look of 2 men who had just been handed a problem significantly above their pay grade. "Of course," Deok-gu said carefully, pulling away from the curb. "Cheongdam, right away. You guys are lifesavers," Priya said, finally catching her breath, entirely unaware that she had just gotten into an armored vehicle belonging to one of the most dangerous men in Seoul, currently being driven by 2 increasingly alarmed enforcers who had no idea whether they'd just picked up their boss's actual blind date or accidentally kidnapped a random woman off the sidewalk. "I'm gonna need to leave a 5-star review for this, no cap. You guys even opened the door for me. Very fancy service. Is this like a premium tier thing?" "Something like that," Min-jun said weakly. At the restaurant, 20 minutes across town, Kwon Min-jae sat at a private table, checking his watch for the 4th time in as many minutes, wondering not for the first time this evening exactly how his mother had managed to guilt him into this in the first place. His phone buzzed. A text from Deok-gu. "Deok-gu, sir. We have a situation. Before we go any further, welcome back if you've been here before. Welcome if this is your first time. Drop your city or country below. I read every single comment. And I genuinely love seeing how far this reaches. Now, I have to warn you, this one is a mess, in the best way. Priya has absolutely no idea what car she just climbed into, and Min-jae's men have no idea what to do about it. Stick around, because the actual blind date hasn't even happened yet, and trust me, it's about to get so much more complicated. Subscribe if you don't want to miss where this goes." "Okay, let's get to that restaurant." Min-jae's phone buzzed again before he could even process the first text. "Deok-gu, we may have picked up the wrong woman." Deok-gu, she got in the car very confidently. Said something about an app. We didn't know how to correct her without it being weird. Deok-gu, she's very friendly. Also, she thinks we're an Uber. Min-jae stared at his phone, reading the messages 3 times, each one somehow raising more questions than the last. "Min-jae, what do you mean you don't know how to correct her? You are trained security professionals. Tell her she's in the wrong car." "Deok-gu, sir, with respect, she was already buckled in and thanking us before either of us could get a word out." It felt rude to interrupt. Min-jae. It felt rude. Deok-gu. She has a lot of energy, sir. It's disarming. Min-jae pressed his fingers against his temple, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a truly spectacular headache. He glanced across the restaurant, at the empty seat where his actual, agency-arranged blind date a woman named Song Ha-yoon, whose photo his mother had forwarded with the subtlety of a woman who'd been planning this ambush for weeks, was supposed to be sitting by now. Min-jae, where is the actual Ha-yoon then? Deok-gu, unclear, sir, possibly still waiting at her building. We may have also accidentally abandoned your actual date. Min-jae closed his eyes briefly, silently cataloging every single life decision that had led him to this exact moment. Min-jae, bring the woman here. I'll handle it when she arrives. Do not correct her in the car. Do not make it weird. Deok-gu, copy that, sir, for the record. She's currently telling us about her cousin's wedding. It's a whole story. 20 minutes later, the car pulled up outside the restaurant, and Priya climbed out with the particular relief of someone who had made it somewhere on time against genuinely difficult odds. Thank you so much, she said, leaning back into the car window to address Deok-gu and Minjun one final time. Seriously, 5 stars. I'm telling everyone about this app. You guys should get like a bonus or something. Will, pass that along, Deok-gu said, watching her walk toward the restaurant entrance with a mixture of relief and genuine concern for what was about to happen next. Priya walked into the restaurant, gave her name at the host stand. Priya, table for 2, should be under Chetty and Kosi, or maybe just Kwan. I'm honestly not sure which name the app used, and was led toward a private table where a strikingly handsome man in a sharp black suit sat waiting, looking, she noted, considerably more nervous than she'd expected for someone who'd apparently pre-arranged a car. Service this elaborate. Hi, she said, sliding into the seat across from him, entirely unbothered by his stunned, slightly panicked expression. Sorry I'm late, kind of a chaotic evening, but your driver situation was impeccable, by the way. Very smooth pickup. Min-jae opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Thank you, he said finally, deciding, in the split second available to him, that correcting her immediately felt significantly more awkward than simply not doing that yet. I'm glad the car worked out. So, Priya said, unfolding her napkin with the brisk efficiency of someone who fully intended to make the most of this meal regardless of how chaotic getting here had been. Should we just dive into the awkward getting-to-know-you small talk? Or do you want to skip straight to the part where we both admit we're only here because our family set this up? Min-jae blinked. I'm sorry? Oh, I mean, that is why we're here, right? Priya said. My aunt set this up. Very insistent Nigerian aunt, does not take no for an answer, told me your family runs some kind of import business and you're, quote, a very serious, hardworking man who needs a woman who can match his energy. She grinned. Honestly, the bar was so low based on her description that literally just showing up on time would have impressed me. So, great job, we're already ahead. Min-jae stared at her for a long, disbelieving moment, several things happening in his mind simultaneously. The growing, absolute certainty that this woman was not, in fact, Song Ha-yoon. The equally growing certainty that somewhere in this city, his actual blind date was standing on a curb, confused and abandoned, and, underneath both of those very reasonable concerns, an entirely unreasonable, unexpected amusement at the sheer, unbothered confidence of the woman currently reorganizing his silverware for better flow. I need to tell you something, he said carefully. Oh no, Priya said, setting down the fork she'd been rearranging. Is this the part where you tell me you're actually married? Because my aunt did not vet you thoroughly enough if that's the case, and I will be having words with her. I'm not married, Min-jae said quickly. It's more complicated than that. More complicated than secretly married, Priya repeated slowly. Okay, I'm listening. Hit me with it. Min-jae took a breath, glancing briefly toward the restaurant entrance, half expecting, at any moment, for Song Ha-yoon to walk in and make this already complicated situation exponentially worse. I don't think you're actually my blind date, he said finally. The table went very quiet. Priya blinked. I'm sorry, what? My actual date, Min-jae said carefully, is a woman named Song Ha-yoon. I believe my security team may have picked you up by mistake, outside your building, at approximately the same time she was also waiting for a car. Priya sat back slowly in her chair, processing this with visibly mounting horror. Your security team, she repeated. As in, plural, as in, more than one person whose job is apparently driving people places. Yes, Min-jae admitted. I got into a car with your security team, Priya said, her voice climbing steadily, thinking it was an Uber. It would appear so. Yes, oh my God, Priya said, dropping her head into her hands. I told them it was 5-star service. I told them I was gonna leave a review. Despite the genuine chaos of the situation, something in Min-jae's carefully composed expression finally, fully cracked a startled, unguarded laugh, escaping him before he could stop it. The first, genuine laugh he'd allowed himself in longer than he could easily remember. I'm so glad this is funny to you, Priya said, though the corner of her own mouth was beginning to twitch dangerously. I just got voluntarily kidnapped by mistake and gave an Uber rating to a man's private security detail. In their defense, Min-jae said, still fighting laughter, they said you were very friendly, and that the story about your cousin's wedding was, apparently, quite compelling. They told you about the wedding story, Priya said flatly. Extensively, Min-jae confirmed. Priya stared at him for a long moment then. Despite everything, the mistaken identity, the abandoned actual date, the private security team currently texting frantic updates somewhere outside, burst into genuine, helpless laughter. Okay, she said. Once she'd recovered slightly, this is objectively the most chaotic first date I've ever been on. And I once went on a date with a man who brought his emotional support ferret. So, what happens now? Do your security guys have to go pick up the actual person now? Should I just leave? Min-jae considered the question, watching this woman across from him completely unbothered, genuinely, unexpectedly delightful. Currently laughing about her own kidnapping with more grace than most people would manage, and found himself, against every reasonable instinct, in absolutely no hurry to end this particular chaos. They're handling it, he said finally. Ha-yoon will be found, apologized to profusely, and sent home in an actual car she ordered herself. He paused. In the meantime, since you're already here, and since I haven't laughed this much in longer than I'd like to admit, would you like to actually have dinner? As yourself, not as whoever my security team assumed you were? Priya studied him for a long moment, something curious and amused crossing her face. You know, she said slowly, under normal circumstances, I would say this is deeply weird. And I should probably leave. But I already told your security guys about my cousin's wedding, so honestly, we're kind of past the point of normal. Sure, let's have dinner. Neither of them noticed, at that exact moment, a young woman walking hesitantly through the restaurant entrance, looking around in visible confusion. Checking her phone against the table numbers with the particular uncertain energy of someone whose ride had never actually arrived. Song Ha-yoon approached the host stand with visible confusion, having spent the last 25 minutes standing outside her apartment building, wondering why her ride had never shown up, before finally giving up and taking an actual taxi. Reservation for Kwon, she said, glancing around the restaurant, or possibly under my name Song? I'm meeting someone for a blind date. The host, checking his list, frowned slightly. I'm sorry, ma'am. That table appears to already be occupied. Ha-yoon followed his gesture toward the private table in the back, where she could see a man matching the photo her aunt had shown her sharp-jawed. Dark-suited, unmistakably Kwon Min-jae, sitting across from a woman who was very clearly, very obviously, not her. That's, Ha-yoon started, confusion deepening into something more pointed. I'm sorry, is that Mr. Kwon? I believe so, ma'am. Ha-yoon walked toward the table with the particular controlled energy of a woman who had dressed carefully for this evening, arranged her schedule around it, and was now watching her blind date laugh genuinely, unguardedly laugh with a total stranger. Excuse me, she said, arriving at the table, her voice polite but pointed. I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm Song Ha-yoon. I believe we had a dinner reservation, Mr. Kwon? The table went instantly, uncomfortably silent. Priya looked between Hayeon and Min-jae with dawning, horrified understanding. Oh no, she said slowly. Oh no. This is her. This is the actual date. Hayeon, Min-jae said, standing quickly, his earlier easy laughter replaced by genuine scrambling mortification. I am so sorry. There's been a significant misunderstanding with my security team, and your security team, Hayeon repeated flatly. It's a whole thing, Priya offered, raising a hand slightly. I got picked up by accident. I thought they were an Uber. I've been here 20 minutes thinking this was my date, which, in my defense, was a completely reasonable assumption given the circumstances. Hayeon looked at Priya for a long moment, something calculating moving behind her carefully composed expression. I see, she said slowly. Then, turning back to Min-jae. So while I was standing on a curb for 25 minutes wondering if I'd been stood up, you were here, laughing, with a woman your security team accidentally kidnapped. When you phrase it that way, Min-jae said carefully, it does sound considerably worse than it sounds exactly as bad as it actually is. Hayeon said, echoing, without any awareness of it. Almost the exact words Keisha had once used in an entirely different, equally chaotic mistaken identity situation involving this same organization. I am genuinely sorry, Min-jae said. This entire situation has been an error from the very beginning. Please, sit. Let me have another table arranged, and we can start this properly actually, Hayeon said. Something shifting in her expression, not anger exactly, but a kind of weary, clear-eyed resignation. I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Kwon. I've been on enough of these arranged dates to recognize when someone's genuinely interested and when they're simply going through the motions to appease their family. She glanced briefly at Priya, something almost amused flickering behind her composed exterior. And for what it's worth, in the 15 seconds I've been standing here, you've looked more relaxed talking to this woman about whatever chaos she's apparently caused than you have in the entire 2 minutes I remember from our one previous meeting at your cousin's engagement party. Min-jae opened his mouth, uncertain how to respond to that particular observation. I'm not upset, Hayeon continued, gathering her small purse with brisk efficiency. Honestly, mildly relieved, if I'm being fully honest. My mother's been pressuring me into these arrangements for months, and I've been dreading tonight since it was scheduled. Consider this my graceful exit. She turned to Priya. Good luck. He seems complicated but not unkind. Thank you, Priya said, genuinely unsure how else to respond to that particular assessment. Hayeon left with the same brisk efficiency she'd arrived with, leaving Min-jae and Priya alone at the table once more, the weight of the entire evening's chaos settling over both of them in the sudden quiet. Well, Priya said finally, that could have gone worse. I think. I'm actually not entirely sure how bad that could have gone, given the baseline chaos we're already working with. I need to send her something, Min-jae said, already reaching for his phone. Flowers. An apology. Something appropriately generous given the circumstances. That's a very reasonable, adult response to accidentally ghosting someone via mistaken identity kidnapping, Priya said. I respect that. Min-jae set his phone down, looking at her properly for the first time since the chaos of Hayeon's arrival and departure, something more serious entering his expression. I should probably also explain, he said carefully, exactly why my security team was driving me to this date in the first place. Given that you now know they exist, and that I apparently require them for something as simple as dinner. Priya raised an eyebrow, some of her earlier easy humor giving way to genuine curiosity. Okay, yeah, actually, I've been wondering about that. Most guys I date do not have a security detail capable of picking up random strangers off the sidewalk. What exactly do you do for a living, Mr. Kwon? Min-jae took a breath, weighing, for a brief moment, exactly how much truth this particular evening's chaos actually warranted. I run several companies, he said carefully. Shipping, logistics, some real estate holdings. Okay, Priya said slowly. That explains Rich. That does not explain security team capable of running an unofficial, unlicensed Uber service. Despite himself, Min-jae felt the corner of his mouth twitch. There are aspects of my business, he said, that require additional security considerations. Disputes with associates who occasionally resolve conflicts through less than conventional business channels. Priya set down her water glass slowly, staring at him with dawning, delighted disbelief. Are you telling me, she said, that I got accidentally kidnapped by an actual, real-life Korean Mafia boss's security team? And then proceeded to have a completely normal conversation with them about my cousin's wedding, and then sat down for dinner with said Mafia boss without realizing any of this? That is, unfortunately, an accurate summary. Yes. Priya sat back in her chair, processing this with the particular stunned silence of someone whose Friday evening had gone from mildly chaotic to genuinely unbelievable in the span of about 45 minutes. You know, she said finally, my aunt described you as a very serious, hard-working man. She did not mention possibly involved in organized crime anywhere in that description. I feel like that's a fairly significant detail to leave out of a blind date pitch. I doubt she knows, Min-jae admitted. Very few people outside my organization do, by design. And yet here I am, Priya said, knowing, after approximately one dinner, that I attended entirely by accident. Yes, Min-jae said slowly, something genuinely uncertain entering his voice for the first time all evening. I recognize that puts you in an unusual position. If you'd like to leave, I would completely understand. This entire evening has been one mistake compounding another, and I wouldn't blame you for wanting no further part of it. Priya considered this seriously, weighing the genuine, mounting absurdity of the entire evening against something else, a curiosity she couldn't quite explain, sparked somewhere between the ridiculous car mix-up and this quiet, careful honesty currently sitting across the table from her. Here's the thing, she said finally. I've had exactly one blind date in the last 2 years that didn't end in some form of disaster, and even that one was just boring, not disastrous. This entire night has been an absolute mess from start to finish. And yet, she paused, studying him with genuine consideration. I'm still here, still having a good time, weirdly, so maybe don't count me out just yet, Mr. Kwon. Something in Min-jae's expression shifted, relief and surprise, and something warmer moving behind his dark eyes. Then perhaps, he said carefully, we should actually order dinner. Properly, this time, as ourselves, without any further identity confusion. Deal, Priya said. But I have several follow-up questions about the organized crime thing that I fully intend to ask throughout this meal. So I hope you're prepared for that. I suspected as much, Min-jae said, something almost fond entering his voice despite the genuine gravity of what he'd just revealed. Neither of them noticed, at that moment, Min-jae's phone buzzing with an update from Deok-gu, sitting forgotten on the table beside his water glass. Deok-gu, Ha-yoon's been dropped home safely. Apology bouquet en route. Also, sir, word's already spreading through the organization about tonight's mix-up. Some of the men think it's the funniest thing that's happened all year. I wanted to warn you before you hear it from someone else. Min-jae didn't see the message until nearly an hour later, deep into a conversation with Priya that had wandered from her cousin's chaotic wedding to his own carefully edited history of the legitimate side of his business. Both of them laughing more freely than either had expected from an evening that began with mistaken identity and a stolen Uber ride. When he finally checked his phone, his stomach dropped slightly at Deok-gu's message. Everything all right? Priya asked, noticing his expression shift. Apparently, Min-jae said slowly, word of tonight's mix-up has already spread through my organization. My men seem to find it quite entertaining. As they should. Priya said. It is entertaining. I fully intend to tell this story at every dinner party for the rest of my life. The time I accidentally got kidnapped and ended up on a date with a mafia bosses is genuinely a top-tier anecdote. I'd prefer if you left out the specific details that could identify me, Min-jae said. Though there was no real concern in his voice, only the easy warmth that had settled between them over the past hour. Deal, Priya said. I'll just call you Mysterious Rich Man number 7. Very vague, very safe. Number 7 implies there were 6 before me. There were absolutely not 6 before you, Priya said. There was one guy with a ferret and a very intense interest in competitive birdwatching. You're at least mysterious rich man number 2, if we're being accurate. Their dinner stretched well past when either of them had originally planned, the conversation flowing easily despite, or perhaps because of the genuinely bizarre circumstances that had brought them together. And by the time Min Jae walked Priya out to a car, something had clearly shifted between them. This was, objectively, the strangest first date of my entire life, Priya said, standing at the car door. And I once dated a competitive birdwatcher. That's saying something. I'd like to see you again, Min Jae said, assuming you're willing to risk further chaos. Oh, I'm definitely in, Priya said. But next time, I'm ordering my own Uber. I don't trust your security team not to accidentally recruit me into something. Understandable, Min Jae said, something warm and genuine in his expression as he watched her climb into the car. She was 3 days into a budding, delightful, increasingly complicated situationship with a man she now knew, with absolute certainty, ran significant portions of an actual criminal organization, a fact that should have alarmed her considerably more than it did, she reflected privately. But somehow hadn't, given how genuinely kind and careful he'd been with her since that first chaotic dinner when everything changed. She was leaving her office on a Tuesday evening, phone in hand, texting Min Jae something about a ridiculous client meeting she'd survived that day, when a black car pulled up alongside her on the street, not one she recognized. Not Deoku's careful, familiar driving, but something colder, more deliberate. 2 men got out, and unlike Deoku and Minjun's earlier bumbling, awkward mistake, these men moved with the particular calculated purpose of people who knew exactly who they were looking for. Priya, Chetty and Kosi, one of them said. Not a question this time. Her stomach dropped. Every instinct honed by 3 years of watching true crime documentaries suddenly, viscerally screaming that this was very, very different from a confused Uber mix-up. Who's asking? She said, backing away slightly, already reaching for her phone. Kwon Min Jae Se's associate, the man said, would like to have a conversation with you. About your relationship with him. We'd prefer to do this the easy way. Before Priya could respond, before she could even fully process the threat unfolding in front of her, a hand closed around her arm, firm and unyielding, guiding her toward the waiting car with a controlled efficiency that left no room for negotiation. Her phone, still gripped in her other hand, buzzed with an incoming text from Min Jae, something easy and unaware, sent moments before whatever was happening to her right now had begun. Min Jae? Dinner Friday? I found a place that does the spicy noodles you were talking about. She had no time to respond. The last thing she managed, before the phone was pulled from her grip entirely, was to hit send on a single word, typed with shaking, desperate fingers as she was pushed into the back seat of the unfamiliar car. Priya, help. Min Jae was in a meeting when the text arrived, and he almost didn't check his phone immediately, almost let it sit for the standard 20 minutes he usually allowed himself before responding to non-urgent messages. Something made him glance at it anyway. Priya, help. His blood went cold instantly. He excused himself from the meeting without explanation, already dialing her number, his heart pounding as it rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. He called Hey One next, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. I need you to trace Priya's phone. Now, sir. What's happened? She sent one word. Help. Then nothing. Find her, Hey One. Immediately, Hey One's team located the signal within 11 minutes. Priya's phone pinging from a warehouse district on the outskirts of the city, an area Min Jae recognized immediately, with a sick, sinking dread, as territory that had, until recently, belonged to an organization he'd had ongoing, tense negotiations with for the better part of a year. Kong Tai Wu, Min Jae said grimly, already moving toward the door, security personnel falling into step around him with practiced urgency. He's been trying to pressure me into ceding territory for months. This is his move. Sir, we don't know that for certain yet, Hey One cautioned, though her own expression carried little conviction in the words. I know exactly what this is, Min Jae said, his voice carrying a cold, controlled fury Hey One had rarely witnessed from him in 8 years of service. He's identified Priya as a vulnerability, exactly the way Chul Min once tried with someone else in our organization. This is a message, hey one, and I intend to respond to it very, very seriously. They arrived at the warehouse district 40 minutes later, security personnel positioned discreetly along the perimeter. Every exit accounted for, every angle considered with the same careful precision Min Jae had learned from watching Sung Mo handle similar crises within their broader network of connected organizations. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Unknown. I believe you're missing something, Min Jae. Or rather, someone. Come to the address I'll send shortly. Alone, we have much to discuss about territory rights, and I suspect your new companion has made you considerably more motivated to negotiate than you've been in months. Min Jae read the message, fury and fear tangling together in his chest as an address arrived moments later, a specific warehouse within the district, deliberately chosen, he suspected, for its distance from any of his organization's usual operating areas. I'm going in, he said. Sir, this is exactly the kind of trap. I know what it is. Hey, A1. Min Jae said sharply. I also know that every minute we spend strategizing is another minute Priya spends terrified, in a warehouse, because of her connection to me. I'm not willing to wait for a perfect plan while she's in danger. He walked into the warehouse alone, exactly as instructed, hands visible, his heart pounding with a fear he hadn't experienced since his own father's assassination attempt years earlier. Kong Tae-woo stood in a pool of light near the center of the space, and beside him, Priya sat in a chair, wrists bound loosely, her expression fierce and furious rather than broken. Despite everything. Min Jae, she called out the moment she saw him, relief and anger warring in her voice. These men are unbelievable. Do you know how rude it is to kidnap someone in the middle of a workday? I had a client call at 4. I'm going to look completely unprofessional. Despite the genuine danger of the moment, something in Min Jae's chest loosened slightly at the sound of her voice, fierce and unbroken and entirely, characteristically herself even now. Are you hurt? He called back. Just annoyed, Priya said. And also mildly concerned about my blood sugar. Because nobody here offered me a snack, which frankly feels like a hostage-taking oversight. Tae-woo's composed expression flickered with something between irritation and reluctant amusement. She's been talking since we picked her up, he said. Extensively, about wedding DJs, mostly. It's a great story, Priya called out. You'd know that if you'd let me finish it. Let her go, Min Jae said, his focus snapping back to Tae-woo, his voice carrying none of the warmth from moments earlier. This is between us, Tae-woo. She has nothing to do with our territory dispute. On the contrary, Tae-woo said calmly, she has everything to do with it now. I've spent months trying to find genuine leverage against you, Min Jae, watching you deflect every negotiation, every pressure tactic, with infuriating calm. And then you go and fall for an American accountant with absolutely no protection, no security training, no understanding of the world she stumbled into. He gestured toward Priya. That's remarkably careless, for a man of your reputation. I'm not an accountant, Priya interjected. I'm a financial consultant. There's a difference. Also, mild threat. Still rude. Min Jae felt something between horror and fierce, unexpected pride at her continued, unbothered defiance even now. What do you actually want, Tae-woo? He said, forcing his focus back to the immediate danger. Say it plainly. The Eastern Manufacturing District, Tae-woo said. Full transfer of control, effective immediately. In exchange, your companion walks out of here entirely unharmed. And I forget this evening ever happened. Min Jae's jaw tightened. The Eastern Manufacturing District represented nearly 30% of his organization's legitimate revenue, a significant, potentially crippling concession. And if I refuse? He asked, though he already suspected he wouldn't. Then we discover exactly how much this woman actually means to you. Tae-woo said simply, and I suspect, watching your face right now, that the answer is considerably more than you'd like me to know. Min Jae looked at Priya, bound but unbroken, glaring at Taewoo with the particular fierce, unbothered fury of someone who genuinely believed, despite the very real danger, that this entire situation was simply an inconvenience to be managed rather than a threat to be feared. He thought of Chulmin's earlier, similar attempt with Naomi and Patrice. He thought of the Eastern roots, the territory disputes, the endless calculation of power and leverage that had defined his entire adult life. And he thought, with sudden, absolute clarity, that none of it mattered nearly as much as making sure Priya walked out of this warehouse safely. "Fine," Min-jae said quietly. "The Eastern District is yours. Release her first, and then we'll finalize the transfer paperwork." "Min-jae, no," Priya said sharply, her earlier defiant humor giving way to genuine alarm. "Don't give up 30% of your business because some guy with a bad haircut kidnapped me over office real estate. That's insane. I can handle myself." "Priya, I mean it," she said, straining slightly against her bound wrists, her expression fierce despite the very real fear Min-jae could now see beneath her earlier bravado. "This is exactly the kind of thing my aunt warned me about when I said yes to this blind date, and you know what? I don't care. But I refuse to be the reason you lose something that important. There has to be another way." Taewoo watched this exchange with visible, growing interest, something calculating shifting behind his composed expression. "How touching," he said slowly. "Genuinely, I confess. I expected simple leverage, Min-jae. I didn't expect to witness something that looks remarkably like real affection." "Does it change your position?" Min-jae asked carefully. Taewoo considered this for a long moment, studying both of them with new, calculating interest. "Perhaps," he said finally. "Or perhaps it simply gives me an entirely different kind of leverage to consider. Let me propose an alternative, Min-jae. Not the Eastern District. Something else entirely, something that will tell me a great deal more about exactly how far you're willing to go for this woman, and exactly what kind of man you actually are underneath the reputation." Min-jae's stomach tightened with fresh, uncertain dread. What kind of alternative? Taewoo's smile turned sharp, calculating, entirely unreadable. "Let's find out together," he said, "exactly how much you're willing to risk, Min-jae, when the stakes aren't simply territory, but something considerably more personal." Taewoo gestured, and one of his men produced a small case, setting it on a nearby crate with deliberate ceremony. Inside, visible even from where Min-jae stood, sat two identical revolvers, both empty, both gleaming under the warehouse's harsh industrial lighting. Priya's breath caught audibly. "Okay, I don't love where this is going." "A simple game," Taewoo said, his voice carrying the particular pleasant menace of a man who'd clearly planned this moment carefully. "1 bullet. Both chambers loaded identically, positioned identically. We each take a weapon. Whoever draws first and survives determines the outcome of tonight's negotiation. Entirely territory, the woman's safety, everything." "That's insane," Min-jae said flatly. "You're proposing actual Russian roulette over a business dispute." "I'm proposing," Taewoo said, "that you demonstrate exactly how much you're willing to risk for something you claim matters more to you than 30% of your revenue." "Words are cheap, Min-jae. I'd like to see actual conviction." "Don't," Priya said sharply, straining against her restraints, genuine terror finally breaking through her earlier bravado. "Min-jae, don't you dare agree to this. This is insane. This isn't a business negotiation. This is a lunatic with a god complex," I heard that Taewoo said, sounding almost amused. "Good," Priya snapped. "I meant it to be heard." Min-jae stood very still, calculating rapidly, every instinct honed by 15 years of surviving exactly this kind of dangerous, unpredictable confrontation, working through the problem with cold, careful precision. "I have a counter-proposal," he said finally. Taewoo raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "You clearly want to prove something," Min-jae said slowly, "about my character, my conviction, whatever you're actually hoping to demonstrate here. Fine. But not through a random chamber and blind luck. Let's settle this the way business disputes have always been settled between organizations like ours: direct negotiation, transparent terms, no theatrics." "And if I prefer theatrics?" Taewoo asked. "Then you're not actually interested in resolving this dispute," Min-jae said. You're interested in humiliating me, or worse, and dressing it up as a legitimate negotiation. If that's genuinely what tonight is about, Tae-woo, then say so plainly, and let's stop pretending this is business. Something flickered behind Tae-woo's composed expression, the first genuine crack Min-jae had seen since walking into the warehouse. Before Tae-woo could respond, the warehouse's side entrance burst open, 3 of Min-jae's security personnel entering with careful, controlled urgency, weapons visible but lowered, the particular disciplined show of force Hae-won had clearly authorized despite Min-jae's earlier instruction to come alone. "Sir," the lead officer said, "Miss, Chetty and Kosi's location was tracked the moment her distress signal went out. We've had this facility under surveillance for the past 20 minutes. Tae-woo's expression darkened considerably. "You brought security, despite my explicit instructions. You kidnapped an innocent civilian and threatened a Russian roulette negotiation over office space," Min-jae said flatly. "I think we've moved well past the point where your instructions carry any actual weight, Tae-woo." Hae-won entered moments later, flanked by additional personnel, her expression carrying the particular controlled fury Min-jae recognized from years of watching her handle exactly this kind of crisis. "Kong Tae-woo," she said, her voice carrying easily across the warehouse, "your own organization's leadership has been made aware, within the past 15 minutes, of tonight's activities. Several of your senior lieutenants are, as we speak, expressing considerable concern about a leader willing to kidnap civilians and propose literal Russian roulette over territory disputes." Tae-woo's composure finally, fully cracked. "You contacted my own people?" "We didn't need to," Hae-won said. "Word travels fast in this industry, Tae-woo, especially when a leader's judgment becomes this visibly, publicly reckless. I suspect you'll be having some difficult conversations of your own very soon, regardless of how tonight concludes." Min-jae moved quickly toward Priya while Tae-woo processed this new, unwelcome information, working urgently at her restraints, relief flooding through him as her wrists came free. "Are you actually okay?" he asked, his voice unsteady despite his best efforts at composure. "I will be," Priya said, though her hands were shaking now that the immediate danger had passed, adrenaline giving way to genuine, delayed fear. "I really thought you were about to play Russian roulette for me, Min-jae. That's extremely intense for a third date." "I wasn't going to let it come to that," Min-jae said firmly, helping her to her feet, keeping one arm steady around her as her legs proved unsteady beneath her. Behind them, Tae-woo's own security began entering the warehouse not to reinforce their boss, Min-jae noted with grim satisfaction, but with the particular cautious, uncertain energy of men reassessing their loyalty in real time. "This isn't over," Tae-woo said, backing toward the warehouse's rear exit, his earlier confident menace giving way to something more desperate, more cornered. "I think it actually is," Min-jae said quietly. "For you, at least, Tae-woo. Whatever authority you thought you still commanded within your own organization, I suspect that's considerably diminished after tonight." Tae-woo disappeared through the rear exit, his own security personnel notably not following him, instead exchanging uncertain glances with each other before several of them approached Hae-won directly, already, Min-jae suspected, beginning the same kind of internal negotiations that had once dismantled Chulmin's organization after his own reckless overreach. Min-jae guided Priya toward the exit, security personnel forming a careful perimeter around them, and once they reached the waiting car, he finally allowed himself to fully process the fear of the past hour, pulling her into a fierce, unsteady embrace the moment they were safely inside. "I am so sorry," he said quietly, his voice muffled against her hair. "This should never have touched you, Priya. None of this was ever supposed to be part of what happens when someone dates me." "In fairness," Priya said, her own voice shaking slightly despite her attempt at humor, "most people's dating red flags are, doesn't text back, or still lives with his mom. Yours is occasionally gets you kidnapped by rival crime organizations. Slightly higher stakes than I was expecting from a blind date." Despite everything, Min-jae felt a startled, exhausted laugh escape him, relief and lingering fear tangling together as he pulled back slightly to look at her properly. "I need to ask you something," he said carefully, "and I need you to answer honestly, given everything tonight revealed." "Okay," Is this too much? He asked. The danger, the reality of what dating me actually means, beyond the charming mistaken identity dinner story. I would understand completely if tonight convinced you this isn't a life you want any part of. Priya considered the question seriously, her earlier adrenaline-fueled bravado giving way to something more thoughtful, more honest. Ask me again tomorrow, she said finally, once I've had actual sleep and processed the fact that I almost witnessed Russian roulette over office real estate. Tonight, I'm too tired and too relieved you're not currently missing a hand to make any big life decisions. She paused, something softer entering her voice despite the exhaustion. But for what it's worth, Min-jae, you stood in that warehouse and refused to gamble with your own life over property. But you were fully prepared to hand over 30% of your business to protect me. That tells me something important about who you actually are, underneath all this chaos. I just need some time to figure out exactly what I want to do with that information. Min-jae studied her for a long moment, exhaustion and fear and something fiercer, more certain, settling into his own expression. Take whatever time you need, he said quietly. I'll be here. As the car pulled away from the warehouse district, neither of them noticed Hae-won standing outside, phone pressed to her ear, already deep in a tense conversation with contacts inside Taewoo's fracturing organization, a conversation that would determine, over the following days, not just Taewoo's fate, but whether the fragile peace between Min-jae's organization and the surrounding criminal ecosystem would hold, or whether tonight's chaos was merely the opening move in something considerably larger and more dangerous still to come. Priya didn't call for 3 days. Min-jae understood, respected it even, forcing himself to give her the space she'd asked for despite every instinct urging him to check in, to apologize again, to somehow fix what felt fundamentally unfixable, the reality that loving him meant accepting a level of danger she'd never signed up for, over a chaotic Uber mix-up and a free dinner. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Her name on the screen made his heart stop for a moment before he answered. Hey, she said, her voice carrying a careful, considering tone he hadn't heard from her before. Hey, he said back, equally careful. How are you? Processing, Priya admitted. I've had a lot of very intense conversations with myself this week. Also with my aunt, who for the record feels extremely guilty about the entire blind date situation, despite having no idea about the organized crime element. I imagine that conversation was complicated. You have no idea, Priya said, something almost laughing entering her voice despite the seriousness underneath. She kept asking if you were, quote, at least good-looking enough to be worth the kidnapping risk, which, honestly, deeply unhelpful question given the actual stakes involved. But also, for the record, yes, extremely, despite the tension of the conversation, Min-jae felt himself smile. I've missed hearing you talk. I need to ask you something, Priya said, her tone shifting into something more serious. And I need an honest answer, not whatever version makes this easier for both of us. Anything? Is Taewoo actually finished? She asked. Or is this the kind of thing where he disappears for a while and then comes back even angrier? And I end up kidnapped again, except this time, nobody has the decency to at least let me finish my wedding DJ story before things go sideways? Min-jae considered the question carefully, weighing honesty against the urge to reassure her more than the situation actually warranted. Hae-won's contacts inside his organization report significant internal collapse over the past 3 days, he said. Similar to what happened with a previous rival, Chul-min, when his own reckless overreach cost him his own people's loyalty. Taewoo's currently in hiding, his organization effectively dissolved, most of his territory being absorbed by more stable, less erratic leadership. He paused. I can't promise you zero risk, Priya. I told you that from the beginning. The first night I explained who I actually am. But I can tell you, honestly, that the immediate threat from Taewoo specifically appears genuinely resolved. Priya was quiet for a long moment, processing this, and in general, beyond just Taewoo. Is this just what dating you looks like? Occasional kidnapping, warehouse standoffs, The possibility that any given evening might end with me needing to distract myself with wedding anecdotes to avoid full-blown panic? I won't lie to you, Min-jae said quietly. There will always be some level of risk, given who I am and what I do. I've spent the past week seriously considering whether the responsible thing, the kind thing, would be to step back entirely. To let you return to a life without any of this danger in it. And what did you decide? Priya asked carefully. I decided that decision isn't actually mine to make, Min-jae said. I decided I've spent enough of my life making choices for people based on what I assume is best for them, rather than actually asking what they want. So, I'm asking you directly, Priya, not deciding for you. What do you want? There was a long silence on the line, long enough that Min-jae found himself holding his breath, waiting. I want to see you again, Priya said finally, her voice steadier than he expected. Not because I'm not scared, because I absolutely am, but because in one chaotic week, you've shown me more about who you actually are than most people show in months of normal, boring dating. You were willing to give up 30% of your business rather than risk anything happening to me. You respected my need for space instead of showing up uninvited with flowers and grand gestures. You just now asked me what I want instead of deciding for me. She paused. That's not nothing, Min-jae. That's actually a lot, especially from a man who could very easily use his power to just take whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it. So where does that leave us? Min-jae asked carefully. Dinner Friday, Priya said. The place with the spicy noodles you mentioned before everything went sideways. But this time, I'm ordering my own car. I'm telling my roommate exactly where I'm going and when to expect me back, and if anyone tries to kidnap me again. I want it on record that I expect significantly better hostage treatment, a snack, at minimum, possibly a phone charger. Despite everything, Min-jae laughed genuine, relieved, entirely unguarded. I can absolutely arrange for hostage situation phone chargers to become standard protocol going forward. Excellent, Priya said. Very reassuring long-term relationship planning. Honestly, they met that Friday, at the restaurant with the spicy noodles, and this time, Priya arrived in her own car, texted her roommate a check-in exactly as promised, and settled across from Min-jae with considerably more caution than their first chaotic dinner, though the easy warmth between them remained entirely intact. So, she said, once they'd ordered, given everything that's happened, I feel like we skipped several normal early dating milestones. Should we go back and do those now? Like, tell me your favorite color. Very low stakes, no kidnapping potential. Blue, Min-jae said, playing along despite himself. Yours? Yellow, Priya said. Very sunny, very optimistic, exactly the opposite energy of the last 2 weeks of my life. She studied him for a moment. Your turn. Ask me something normal. Min-jae considered this seriously. What made you decide to actually stay? He asked. After everything. I've been genuinely trying to understand it since your call. Priya thought about the question seriously, turning her water glass slowly in her hands. Because most of my life, she said finally, I've dated men who were exciting on the surface and completely predictable underneath. Same conversations, same small ambitions, same comfortable, boring safety. You terrify me, Min-jae, genuinely. But you're also the first person in years who's actually surprised me. Made me feel like I couldn't predict exactly how any given evening would go. She smiled slightly. Turns out I'd rather have an interesting, occasionally terrifying life than a boring, completely safe one. Ask me again in 5 years if that was the right call. I intend to, Min-jae said, something warm and certain settling into his expression. Ask you again in 5 years, I mean. That implies I'm planning on you still being here. Bold assumption, Mr. Kwan, Priya said, though her smile suggested she didn't mind the assumption at all. Their dinner continued, easy and warm despite everything that had brought them here: mistaken identity, an accidental kidnapping, a warehouse standoff over territory and Russian roulette, and, underneath all of it, something genuine and unexpected that neither of them had planned for when Priya had climbed into the wrong car 4 minutes late, for a blind date that was never actually meant for her. Neither of them noticed Deok-gu and Min-jun, seated inconspicuously at a nearby table on Hae-won's orders, quietly, professionally keeping watch, though Priya did, at one point, glance over and offer them a small, knowing wave, which Deok-gu returned with the particular sheepish warmth of a man who would, for the rest of his career, be known throughout the organization as the man who'd once accidentally recruited his boss's future girlfriend as an Uber passenger. If this story had you laughing through the Uber mix-up and then holding your breath through that warehouse standoff, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Mine's the wedding DJ story nobody ever got to finish. And let me know where you're watching from tonight. Subscribe for more stories that'll make you laugh, panic, and fall in love, sometimes all in the same scene. See you in the next one.